Hello, and welcome to the video version of the Left of Greg podcast. I'm Brian Marin, the host and creator of the show. As always, I will be joined by human behavior expert Mr. Greg Williams, who the show is affectionately named after. On the show, we discuss different topics through the lenses of what we call human behavior pattern recognition and analysis. If you'd like to find out more about what that is, please check the links in the episode details and go to our website to learn more. Please don't forget to follow us on social media. The links are also in the episode details, and hit the like and subscribe button to help support our work. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy the show. Second, let me know when it pops up there, Greg.
We are live, Brian.
Okay. We are live on Facebook, which means we are going to go ahead and get started today for those of you just listening. And just another reminder, go ahead and follow me on Facebook so you can follow along when we pop up live. But today, super excited to finally get on again here. Coach Andy Reese. I'll give you coach title, whichever one. It's no longer, I think the last time you were on, it was Lieutenant Colonel Andy Reese. So now we'll just say Coach Reese, I guess. But appreciate you coming on here, man. Thank you so much for coming back on.
Hey guys, man, I woke up like at 4:00 in the morning and I started looking at my watch like Jocko, thinking I was cool. I think I was so jacked up seeing you guys, you know.
And yet you chose that shirt, Andy. Yet with all
you
that
had all that time. You had all that time. And
but I do love Brian and I have been referred to as the Yangs in Yin and Yang. So I do just shout out for the hat, brother.
Teen C surf shop in Hawaii, man. It's kicking it old school 80s. It actually was a tribute to Brian Marin when he had his Magna PI logo previously. So I felt compelled, and it's Aloha Tuesdays. It's a thing apparently.
Yeah,
amazing.
You can every once in a while. Still on Friday, I pull out the Aloha shirt, and I have not had that mustache since then. That point last year, I think it was during the pandemic. It must have been. I don't know. It was a lot of weird things going on during 2020.
Realistically,
is that Wastuk? Is that what that's called?
Yeah. So just so you know, the two most requested things, Andy, was getting you back on the podcast to talk about what's happened during COVID and bringing back that mustache on Marin because it was like a young Mark Spitz. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Everybody commented on that, and other people wanted to have a contest. What's in Marin's mustache? Comb it out and see if we can find
what's
like
going on in there.
Baby, you know what I'm saying? Coins, whatever.
Loose change.
Exactly.
Loose change. Half of a burrito from yesterday. Yeah.
It was like the guy, you'd seen the guy with the beer with the ramen noodles in the bowl, and he's kind of like in there throwing it around, eating it out of there.
And shout out for ramen noodle guy. Hey, that kid's amazing, by the way. I wish we'd have half that guy's followers. He can simplify anything.
Him and like the TikTok Ocean Spray guy. Like, I mean,
changed his life. What amazing.
Unreal, man. No, but I'm excited to be. I feel like I'm in rarefied air here with being a repeat offender. And my goal is to be like the Alec Baldwin or Steve Martin left of Greg, and to be like on like 6-7 times.
Yep,
that's
have me.
That's kind of a lot to live up to. Maybe you might want to I'm going to to set the expectations lower for you.
Much lower. So, let's just say, and that's our show, folks.
And there we go. And thanks for coming on, Andy. Great catching up.
Exactly.
So here's
was that too stalkerish? Was that too much?
Well, it took so long to get you on the show, Andy, because we had to raise bond money. Yeah, you get what I'm trying to say?
To get you
and then we had to talk to your parole agent to see if we could get you out long enough. That's a fake background, folks. Andy's actually calling us from cell block B9.
Oh my gosh. So to jump in, you got a lot going on. If anyone heard the last episode with you, Andy, you were talking about the book Deliberate Discomfort, which you kind of contributed to, part of the Mission 60 that you're a part of. It's a great book, a whole bunch of stories from different folks in there. And I love the saying always, hey, let's get comfortable being uncomfortable, and what that means. And that also kind of does work with your mental skills training that you do. You're a coach now. You have been for a while doing some coaching programs in Texas, but now you got to kind of part of getting in some minor league baseball in on that, which is really cool, tied in. So you're kind of working your way up there. I love that. And for anyone who didn't hear the last one too, Andy he's just retired out of the Army. You did a lot of really cool stuff there. You were West Point grad, played ball there. I mean, when you look at your resume and what you've done, it's actually much different than who you actually are in person. So that's It's one of those, this
Evidence-
guy's really impressive.
Evidenced by the ensemble.
And then you meet him and go, oh, okay, it's just
Yep.
Andy. No, but seriously, we appreciate you coming on. You got a lot I kind of want to get into, and I'd love to start with kind of the deliberate discomfort Mission 60 stuff that you're doing, because you could talk about that a little bit, because then want to talk about, all right, now you got to eat your own stuff here, that you eat your own sausage that you made here during 2020 during COVID. Like, you got to eat your words now. You got to live by that. Here's a challenge. So I kind of want to start there, and so give us a little bit of background about deliberate discomfort and the Mission 60, and then what's been going on.
Yeah. Greg, what's the quote that art imitates life and life imitates art, right?
Yep.
Exactly.
Forgot who said that. I mean, it was really, I guess, ironic in a way that we wrote that book. And I mean, and you guys know, I mean, what I respect the most out of you guys walk the talk, right? You guys have a lot of integrity and humility and humor about what you go about doing. And I try to do the same thing. And so we wrote this book, and because we just were trying to figure out, hey, how do we take these evidence-based best practices from these two worlds that otherwise are separated, from special forces and behavioral science, and how do we bring them together, just like you guys are, to include law enforcement. And then, how do we kind of create this how-to like field manual for people to start it? And then, it's almost like we planned it. I think there was a conspiracy theory that we were in like Wuhan province at the time, writing the book. And so, as fate would have it, obviously, COVID hit, and, and here we are, a year later. I mean, we're working the year anniversary, which is just kind of crazy to think about and put that in perspective, but I think we ourselves were thrust into this environment. It's almost like taking what we've experienced in combat and that VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, and the first and foremost of that being complexity, and then bringing that to the home front. And I find it interesting to like those. I even said this to my wife the other day. Had the crazy stuff happen here in Texas with, obviously we had the crazy cold front.
Yep.
Came in, and then all these compounding effects, and complexity theory and that domino effect was really going down. And I felt my stress level just really start to raise. I mean, and I was like, and then on top of the pandemic, and I turned to my wife and I haven't really felt like this since I was in combat. But it's weird for us as veterans, because now we're in this kind of weird VUCA environment at home. And so I feel like it's been the ultimate testing ground and proving ground for a lot of these skills that we've been talking about across the dimension. And, and I think the company Mission 60, like a lot of companies, had to pivot, because we launched this book. They were ready to go and start delivering, stuff in person with guest speaking, with seminars, more of our training, that we've been doing. And then all of a sudden it just stops. Nobody's doing this in person. So now they had to pivot to do some online stuff. So we created a masterclass series, which I was really excited to be about. And then that got rolled out. They started a 60-day deliberate discomfort challenge, which is really, really cool. And then obviously they featured the masterclass. And then, I've since had to pivot more towards my traditional role with the Cincinnati Reds. But just this last year, I think, has been the ultimate test on, if you didn't know where your mental toughness was, before, last year, you certainly know where that's at now.
Yeah.
And hopefully, what a great opportunity to really get immersed in that and really hone those skills, and to gain some self-awareness and learn how to then, learn how to manage yourself and influence others. And that's how I really have seen this as a gift. It's been an opportunity, and I transitioned during this time. Who does that? I mean,
well, that's what I wanted to say. If you didn't get to it, like, you also during this time were just transitioning out of the military, which for anyone listening, if those types of jobs or that role, or even if you've been at a company doing the same thing for a long time, I don't care, especially the military, I don't care if you were in for a year or 30 years, like when you get out, there's so much, it's such a huge transition. Often it's bigger usually than people even give it credit for, who are going through it. You're kind of like, oh, well, whatever, dude, I'm excited, I'm doing this. And you're like, dude, your whole entire world just came crashing down, and you haven't even realized it yet. And that's tough. So you had all this going on during a pandemic too, and the move to Texas and everything going on in the country. You're just like, I mean, that's huge. So what what got you through it, or what did you use? Because, one of the things that I like about you, because, you're mental skills coach, so there's a lot behind that. And the big thing is, because like you post stuff on LinkedIn, which I'm barely on anymore. But I love what you have on there, because it's, you use a lexicon. There's terms that you use to describe things, and those words are important. They have meaning, and there's different ones. So maybe start there and tell me what you did to cope with everything that was going on during this time, because that's the time, like you said, this was an opportunity, but a lot of people didn't see it that way. So what allowed you to see it that way, kind of?
Yeah, I think that first of all, timing's everything, right? And then I was fortunate. I stopped working for the Army, and I went on this awesome 9-month odyssey where basically the Army cut me loose to go do this. It's the Department of Defense it's called Skills Bridge, and I like that idea because it's I like the idea about transition being crossing a bridge, and you guys know, and really the only people who really get it are the guys who've gone through it, and of course you guys have. We all transition, like you said, Brian, but for me, I stopped working for the Army, and that was great, because all I could focus on during that time, and I was waiting to move, and all I was focused in on was trying to do some self-exploration, obviously, while I was trying to be a good dad and husband, and the kids are going online. And so but it was interesting, because I still had the option to go back and pull my retirement paperwork. I'm still a year out, and and so I was at that crossroad. Hey, is this, because the job market was just going to go to crap? We knew the market was going to tank, and it was like, I think conventional wisdom would have been like, all right, well, why would you get out of the Army? It's so much easier for you to stay in the Army, ride this out, wait till the economy does better. And this is where my wife and I, being a team, decided, hey, no, because we had that conversation. Hey, like, do we still want to do this? And we kept on asking ourselves all the way up until we move it, do we want to do this? And I listened to my instincts, ironically, which is, the deliberate act of looking at, what my instincts are telling me, what the environment is telling me, macro to micro, what my gut is telling me. And my gut has gotten a lot larger since so my gut brain is a lot bigger than my other brain. But and we just said, this is, our instincts are telling us, when we gather all the information and we want to make a decision about what we need to do next, right now that the timing is good, and that we need to move out across this bridge to the next ridgeline, because we need to move towards our future, not our past, right? And you've done everything you want to do in the Army. You have all these great opportunities lined up. And for me, it was like, I think some people too, the other decision was like, okay, do I just want to focus it on one thing? And so at that time, you guys knew I had an internship lined up with the Rockies, and, which, by the way, Greg, I don't live in Colorado. I know you were really confused. I really confused you, but I don't live in Colorado. And every time I
looked too, like, which blew. Thanks for that.
He drove around the neighborhood.
Greg,
what's wrong with inferring that if you work for the Colorado Rockies, that you may be somewhere in Colorado or near a Rocky? But please go on. Please.
I actually like to think that you just wanted me to be your neighbor, but which would have been pretty awesome. But
well, technically, don't the Rockies start down in like El Paso, Texas? He's in Texas. No,
way further south, and they go way further north.
We could go with that, but yeah. So anyways, and then so I was working with the Rockies, not living in Colorado, and then doing McChrystal Group, and then I was doing
not living in Afghanistan.
What's that?
Not living in Afghanistan or Iraq with the McChrystal Group.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm doing stuff in McChrystal Group, and so it just felt like a high stakes game in musical chairs, right? And so I was like, I need to have a chair when this is all said and done, and there was a lot of anxiety associated with that. And then you go move during the pandemic, and I lived with I think the most VUCA environment was probably living with my mother-in-law for about 30 days while we're waiting for a house to open up. So I do not. I love my mother-in-law, but I don't advise that on anyone. And then I think it just it all worked out, right? But I mean, I'll say the stress level, the last year, and a lot of people, and it's hard to describe this to people too, because you start to talk about the year and they're like, oh, well, it was tough for everyone. It's kind of one of those like really, comments. And so you keep it to yourself. And I'm not getting in a pissing contest on what's harder, right.
That's
an act of futility. But for me, I think that it was an opportunity to practice what I teach. And to
Right.
me, everything that I teach and I coach starts with me and my family. I don't prescribe or guide anybody to do anything I haven't gone through myself. And to me, that's where the opportunity was. It wasn't a threat. It was really an opportunity to grow and get introspective, get some perception, which perception, you know, talking about words that mean things. That's how you see the world. It's the
Right.
lens you see the things, and then that helps you, you know, gain perspective, which is how you understand how you fit in the world and how the world affects you, which you
And,
guys do such an awesome job talking about.
no, thank you. And that's a good point, because you brought up two things, or a few things right there, the perception and perspective. And then you talked about, everyone experiences stress and trauma and these situations very differently, right? It's very subjective. So what is really difficult for maybe me in one area is very easy for someone else in another area, but what's very difficult for them in one area is easy for me. And I think but what this showed, and that's what we had when we had our good buddy Dr. Peter Bryant Greenwood on. He had a great line. He just said, I think he's like, we've vastly overestimated the mental health resilience of our country. We are not okay.
Yep.
And the pandemic showed that, right? Because you have all these, there's stress fractures there, and then once that starts to happen, well, that's where you see it pour out. And then everyone goes, oh, well, they look at the stress fracture as the problem, not look at, no, there's all the stress behind the stress fracture is the problem. That's what we need to get at. And I think so now we start blaming each other and start taking up these different causes that are just, there's their symptoms, man. Come on. Those are just symptoms. Like it's like going in, I just tell people, it's like going to the doctor being like, yeah, I got a headache. And they go, let me check you out. Like, hey, you got a really bad brain tumor. I need to operate. No. Just give me something for my headache. That's the problem. It's like,
Yeah.
no, it's not. That's
Yeah.
that's the cause of the problem. That's the symptom of it. And so that perception and perspective is, it's really important, also very difficult to get an accurate one sometimes, especially when you're in these situations. Same thing that you're going through that and you're talking about, hey, I had this conversation with my wife about, here's what we're going to do. What do we do? I mean, even just having that conversation alone is a step in the right direction, regardless of even the outcome, being able to bring that stuff up. Because there was stuff even too, I'm doing everything's fine. It's pandemic. I got this. Little one's home from school. Cool. I'll pick up that slack. I'll shift my work schedule. I'll do this. Greg and I, let's start looking at other stuff. Let's start doing free webinars. Let's do everything we can. Let's just get it out there and keep moving. And so instead of doing the stop, take a look up, look around, we just head down, barreling through. And then what happens when you start doing that is, I remember, it was a few months into the lockdown when it was real bad, when it first started over a year ago. And then all of a sudden me and my wife were getting these arguments to the point where I'm like, what the fuck are we arguing about? She's like, I don't know. And then we start laughing, like, what? I'm like, I'm so dumb. This should be my job. We are way too stressed right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And taking that step back. So I like that you brought up perception and perspective. So how do you as a mental skills coach and trainer to very, very high caliber people, how do you do that in your personal life?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's really all about choices, I think, and little micro choices, right? Like you said, I mean, you can plow down, you can keep your blinders on, but I think it's understanding how your attention works, like more like a flashlight that's both broad and narrow, and then internal and external, right? And I think as I was going, I think you got to be, the idea of being present is way overrated and overstated. I think that's how you perform at your best. But I think, I think it's our mind is designed to both be in the past, the present, and the future. Our body's always present, right? I think that we're designed to be at our best in the present, but I think you have to take some point of time to inventory, what my past experiences relate to, and what I did well, what I didn't do well, relate to what I'm going through right now too. And I think that's what you're talking about when it comes to, it's not the water, it's the dam, right?
Yeah.
And so, if the dam is built right, that ultimate test is when, the waters rise, and is it going to fracture or not too? And so I think that having that perspective about like, hey, we've been through harder things than this.
Mm-hmm.
And then the affirmation. So our lens in which we saw this relative stress to us, it was like, okay, well, we've moved before. Transition, yeah, you're transitioning your life, but you had to change jobs and operating environments and cultures. You've done that every 2 years in your life. This is different. So we need to attack this different. And so, and how we look at the problem needs to be different. And I like to think about that, through a lens of empathy too, because I think I like design methodology, design thinking. Everything begins with empathy and how you see things, how others see things. And it wasn't a problem that needed to solve. It was a goal that we were pursuing, and so for us, it just made sense for us to have these logical steps and then build in some flexibility in terms of, not only how we were thinking, but understand how that affected how we were feeling, and then how that affected how what we were doing or doing. And I think we understood too, and I think this is important for the audience to understand, is that there's a fallacy that we control that process. We influence that process at best within ourselves, and and I think some of it is when you feel anxious and your mind starts to race and you start to do things erratically. It's like you said, is if you can learn to accept that, and diffuse from that, remove yourself, just like you just talked about, Brian, which I had to do many, many times, to when I felt my triggers and my, starting to, and I've got a temper, and I always have, and I go from 0 to 80 like that.
Yep.
I'm a very empathetic and passionate guy. There's a shadow side to that,
Yeah.
I've got a temper, and so when my triggers started to happen, and my jaw started to clench, my face gets red, stuff like that too. Like, how did I first accept it? How did I diffuse from that? And then what did I do to commit to then help reverse that cycle, so I wasn't spiraling down? I wasn't spiraling down and flushing down the toilet, because that psychological momentum can happen very easily. How could I cycle up, right? And reverse that cycle to get the flywheel effect to where it. But again, I thought that's how I saw things, how I framed things. My selective perception as far as what I could take in that was useful, what I could get rid of that was not. And like staying with my mother-in-law for a month. That wasn't something that I wanted to do, and so, but we had to do it, right? So how did I accept that reality of that situation and make the best out of that crappy situation, just to survive in advance till we get it into our house, right? And then when ultimately there was stressors that were related to the situation, because we're all living in four walls, how could then I create space for myself to then have self-awareness, commit to actions, like working out every day was huge for me. Just walking and getting out of the house and taking the kids and going to the pool. I was lucky we had just creating those little micro moments in my routine to create space for me to, accept, diffuse, commit, was very, very important. And a lot of times those are happening and we don't even realize it and we don't leverage it. And I think that's what for me, specifically the acceptance piece was huge, because I think that's really important for realistic optimism,
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's the, as you guys, I'm a huge fan of the only Navy guy I think I ever liked and admired was James Stockdale, right? And so I'm joking around, but James Stockdale, I mean, he has that Stockdale paradox for a reason. I mean, I understand my purpose and what I'm ultimately trying to go to and why I'm here, but I don't never lose fact of the reality and the suck that I'm going through. Because the Pollyannish approach doesn't work either.
Right.
Viktor Frankl, I mean, studied and observed those are the people who died.
Yeah.
So that's not a survival mechanism either, let alone a thriving mechanism.
One of the science relies on socialization. So you come up with hypothesis. There's hypothesis testing. The scientific community takes a look at it. One of the reasons that you're a thought leader of our generation is that you got to do that with lives on a battlefield. You got to see what worked and what didn't. And to go back to Brian's LinkedIn comment, the only social media that I'm on is LinkedIn and farmersonly.com, the only two that I understand at all. And the reason I consistently am drawn to your posts out of all the, and trust me, there's such tripe on there. The picture of the dog balancing the bone on its nose until it gets the thing, and then they get 10,500 hits an hour, and we put something on homophily and how to survive in a situation, and we get 2, and it's Brian and I. But enough of that. When I read your stuff, you're very deliberate with your approach. The other thing is you're not for everybody. And so, folks, if you're listening and this is your first rodeo with Andy Reese, I'd say, please do me a favor, look him up, take a look at what he's writing there, because you have more of a stick approach than the carrot and the stick. You hold people accountable. You say, here
Yep.
is compassion, here is empathy, and here is the structure, the architecture that you need to get from point A to point B, or Z, or wherever. And I love that that comes from who I know as Andy, who the United States Army knows as Andy, who your followers at Mission 60, I called. They said, Mission 2 is probably better for you. There's a pool and a pond. They wouldn't even answer me. They didn't even send me the fucking book, just so you know. But the idea, and so those bastards, the idea is that you understand that life and sports and business and industry are a game of inches, and not many people play on that razor's edge. And we operate there, and we have operated there, and you operate there, so we can have this wonderful conversation about it. But some people are lost, going, oh yeah, well, it's just not that important, and this and that. And that's why your life blows. That's why you can't get out of the rut that you're in. And one of the things is, like, I read all this stuff about sleep, and it's wonderful about sleep. But people aren't approaching that scientifically, Andy, and you do when you put it in a hierarchy of need, the not Maslow, that sham. But the idea is that, like, if your circadian rhythm wasn't important to you, then it wouldn't bother you that in Alaska you have all these months of daylight. Okay, if your circadian rhythm wasn't important to you, you wouldn't get screwed up when we have daylight savings time and all this other stuff. And what COVID, the entire 360 that COVID did with the pandemic, is it turned life just a couple of ticks off a straight, and your engine wasn't firing on full optimal efficiency and efficacy, right? And so now all of a sudden, those things that you took for granted, simple things like time management, are now out the window. And you have more here and you have less there. Look, I know people that have changed their life because they put Big Bang Theory on an hour later, or switched, NCIS from Tuesday to Thursday, and it disrupted their whole life. And those are the failed to thrives. Those are the bottom feeders. Those are the folks that may be enjoying their small portion of life, but they'll never see the enormity of the life experience. And so you grabbed that by the haunches and said, okay, listen, I'm going to go see what's next. And when you write about it, here's 5 or 6 things that you can do today to improve your station in life. But you got to do the work, and you know how important that is. How many people okay? So I'm getting a comment, in town yesterday, and somebody says, "Hey, you lost a lot of weight," and I say, "Yeah," and I know exactly where it went. I mean, I know every drop, I know every experience, every emotion that went along with that. And Andy, you got to understand that since we saw each other in person and everything, I'm dropping pounds. I make it a thing that every time I see Brian, I'm in better shape. I'm doing this. Why? Not because of me. It's not about me. It's about, I still have a message to share. And if I'm not my best me, that game of inches goes out the window. I lose all of those opportunities. And so, enough with the Andy Reese stroke, but I think you need to know that what you did is you found your niche. You had a niche in the military. And what you did is you came out and you just blew that out of the water, Colorado or not. And so I appreciate that. And I think the same people that love and watch and admire our show, and I'm very humble and very thankful for that. North Macedonia, Japan, Croatia, all you folks. I think, Andy, I think you're going to love what you're doing too, because it can't just be the mission to come on the air to sell a product, and that's why people sometimes ask, hey, why don't we have doctors on our advisory board? Because we got end users, we got the street guys, we got guys that were booting doors and ramming cars and living the experience every day. And most of that, the doctors write about it and put it up on a shelf somewhere, and you got to blow the dust off it and go back and find that quote. Andy, you're living it every day. So that's the difference. That's the thing I think that epitomizes what we try to call the Left of Greg show. So for that, thank you. I know that was a long rambling thing, but I just had to get out how your compassion and empathy comes with tangible skills, but only after you get beat up a little bit in what Andy Reese calls the arena, right?
Right, man. Yeah, 100%. You got to choose to enter, man, and that's the price of admission. And
that's it.
I really appreciate that, Greg, and everything you're talking about with the game of inches, and is why I love baseball so much. I'm not a baseball guy at all, and it was interesting to me as I went through the process, because I always saw that I was a deficit. I'm like, man, I'm just really wearing my white belt here. I'm choosing to go into an industry I have no business being. And they asked me, like, hey, why the hell, you're a football guy, man. Like, like you've done all this stuff with the NFL and whatnot. And you're at a SEC school, whatnot too. And I'm like, look, man, I love baseball because it's a game of endurance that's built on failure, just like life. And what better crucible to then make young? I want to help make the guys, the chances of these guys, and I love working with the minor leagues, and they're just like soldiers. They're the same dudes off the street from all over the place. It's very
they're hungry. They're ready. Yep.
Yeah, and they have this big goal, and the mission's different, obviously, but they're the same. They're still Joe, and they still do Joe things, and they're bright-eyed and bushy-tails, and they don't got it all figured out, and they want to make it to the league, man. And the reality is that 90% of them are not going to make it to the league. And when they do make it to the league, it's what's crazy about baseball is that like you may make your debut, and then the next day you're back down.
Yeah.
Level. I mean, it fucks with your head big time.
Yep.
Like, and one other game entertainment that you're in where 70%, if you fail 70% of the time, you're in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Hitting. I mean, think about that. I mean, and so when you're failing a lot and your performance is primarily based on how much you produce, because baseball is all about statistics, and everybody's watched Moneyball and read about Billy Bean, which has been around for a while now. Is that it's this weird paradox you're in, because it's about the process. You know how important the mental game is. Yogi Berra famously said 90% of the game is half mental. I think Yogi Berra and Greg would have a that.
We were good friends.
You gotta wait till you meet my brother. He's like the Yogi Berra of military stuff. He puts all the same military quotes. He's like, it's the same thing. I was like, you are the Yogi Berra of naval special warfare. But go on.
Yeah, so. I think Greg and Yogi. I would love to see that. I'd love to see them drink and smoke cigars together.
We would come up with a book of malapropisms on the spot at that time. No, but look, Andy, when you're talking about the baseball diamond, you're talking about the batter's box being a cognitive gym. Okay. You're talking about the relationship between the pitcher on the pitcher's mound and the catcher. And you're talking about the synergy that they either create or they don't post those numbers and they lose games. You're talking about the outfield having to run through the batting order and figure out what this guy does against a left-hand pitcher. The reason people have virtual games of baseball, the reason that we played it in the sandlots as kids in Detroit, and the reason that it's $20 million a year to $100 million a year for a player is because we're fascinated by the science and the math and the human performance. It's a daytime soap opera. You get what I'm trying to say? That we can't look away from. I totally agree.
It is. And that's why I love it. I mean, and that's why it's so cool. And I think they're at the cutting edge of where things are, and that's why I really gravitated towards them. And the Reds were like, all right, and they're like, I call them the Marines of Major League Baseball, because they you appreciate this, Marion, because they have the smallest market, they have the lowest budget, but I'm putting my money on it right now is that they're the most innovative because of that.
Yeah, no, that's how that's a great point. That's exactly how it works, is because they're forced to. They're not the Yankees, man. They don't have that. They are forced to. I mean, that's the thing of the Marines. Like, here, you get the worst trading, no money, go figure it out. And then so you sit there and you have to work harder to produce the same amount of outcome as someone else. So you pick up so much more experience in that time and learn. So that's a great analogy. And I kind of want to get into that mental skills job that you have right now and kind of what it entails. And actually, you brought up a great point about or you or Greg just said the cognitive game of baseball, how much there is. And there's a great documentary I saw a while back called Fastball, and it's the progression of the fastball in Major League Baseball and how it changed. It's really cool. You got to check it out. Yeah, it was on Netflix. I don't even know if it is anymore. I'll try and track it down and send you.
Put that in this.
He was watching that after Speedball, which is he was doing the meth and
so it's bouncing off the walls. No, but what's really cool about it is they track how it's changed over time, the speed, and then how we measure the fastball. And they're saying some of these guys, like, before, because of the way we measure it, they were actually throwing faster than some of the guys today. But what they get into, the greatest thing, and this goes into a lot of what Greg and I teach, and you'll go right into what you teach with mental skills as mental performance, is understanding heuristics, and there's a lot to it, right? But the idea is when that batter's in that batter's box, right? As that ball is being released from the pitcher, he's already making that decision whether or not to swing, right? So what they have these big time hitters on there, and they're going, you don't understand when you go up against this guy, when Nolan Ryan throws that top fastball that he's ever thrown, he's like, it's crazy, because as it comes across the plate, it rises up as it do that. So then they're like, Okay,
Yeah.
well, that defies physics. So that's not actually what's happening, right? But the thing is, because they've hit so many, let's say 98 up to 100-mile-an-hour fastball, their brain is making that calculation of where that ball is going to be as their bat comes around. Well, here's the thing. If you're throwing at 105, that ball hasn't dropped as far yet. So that ball is now 3 inches higher than where your brain expected it to be. So you that batter processing that goes, oh crap, it raised up, and he misses, right? But the ball didn't raise up. It's in a higher spot because it fell slower because of physics, and the time it took to get there was faster. But it's such a great it was just an explanation of heuristics and how you process information, even at that high caliber level. You're talking, that's a subject matter expert in that field of hitting a fastball, right? You get these players, like there's no one else who can describe it like they can and have as much experience. So to show how that actually affected their perception of what was actually happening, their perception defied any reality that was actually occurring. So it's really incredible on that point. But I kind of want to just kind of preface you and your mental skills and what you do with that kind of story. You got to check that out. So what is it that you do with these guys, and how do you work on that mental skills, and what does that entail?
And Brian, I would throw in too the work of the late Dr. Bill Harrison. His
Oh,
son is
yeah.
still in the game.
Yeah.
Andy, write that down. Slow the game down. They've got an incredible website. We used them back during the formation of the Combat Hunter Principles. Just incredible work. And Bill died just a couple of years back, but his son has taken up the work, and that's also a part of that doctor-player link. And that the Reds reached out to you as a subject matter expert in life. You get what I'm saying? Life theory and how to manage that. That's brilliant. So please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to think that the Reds hired me because I'm a leader who happens to be a mental skills coach, right? And in fact, they've said that, and so I think the mental skills piece is a subset, right? But it really, I think it starts with relationships, so it's like I'm coming in new to the organization. I think the one thing that I missed last year with the Rockies is that interaction, right? To rebuilding trust and rapport first and foremost, right? So for me, this year is really just about just doing just that. It's about building trust and rapport, because that's a prerequisite for everything. Like, none of these players give a shit about anything I have to tell them as a coach, and especially their mental game, which is very personal, unless we have rapport and we have trust, and then we have really good communication, right? And so those are my 3 focus areas this year, right? So it's like, all right, well, how do you want to get better at something? How do you get comfortable being uncomfortable? So that's why I'm moving towards. So I don't know shit about baseball, but that I'm naturally curious. I'm coming in with my white belt on. That's my perception. And so I'm just, having conversations, and it may have nothing to do with about baseball. And I try to find, and I'm using, the things that you guys talk about all the time about matching and mirroring, and about using body language, and finding points of connection, and then, and talking about other things that we may have in common, or that, and I'm using motivational interviewing. It's a thing. I'm like, where the hell has this been? Motivational interviewing, coaching athletes to be their best. That's kind of what inspired my recent post that you guys responded to. It's like, where the hell?
The shit sandwich.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to say the shit sandwich, because that was perfect. It was right in the wheelhouse.
Yeah,
right.
I'm doing this shit all wrong, man. And like, and just in terms of like how I ask really good questions, like, how do I don't, just slow down, and I listen to them, and I watch them, and I hear what they say, and find out what the hits or misses in this conversation. And then I go back and I assess how I do that. I figure out, okay, what was their name again? Okay, what position do they play again?
Yeah.
Where am I again? Am I in Chattanooga, Dayton, or Daytona? Which, thanks, Reds. Daytona, I'm going to be completely fucked up, by the time the season's over. And so I do think and start really doing what that target analysis, understanding the operating environment, understanding I love unwritten rules of the road. And for me, like, I'm going to really fall back on my previous experience, which is being, when I was a combat advisor, and I was super uncomfortable, and, I'm advising the Iraqi army. I barely trusted my teammates, let alone the family.
Right.
And I remember going through that, and I was like, and it's interesting because I had a great conversation with a great friend of mine, Ben Freakley, who's the director of mental performance for the Blue Jays, and just a phenomenal practitioner. Shout out to Ben. And it was talking about the idea about letting the game come to you. And I think what's interesting is veterans and men of action, and I love that action leader type thing. You want to go do something, right? And so how do I get comfortable in not doing it, and by doing something by not doing anything?
Yep.
I mean, how do I do that? you
Yeah.
know, so that is going to be really uncomfortable for me when I go to spring training. I already know it. I'm going to be sitting around with my hands in my pocket watching baseball, you know. And so what can I do to understand the game and get to know people and to establish a baseline based on rapport and trust that then I can build on and over time, right? And really be deliberate and intentional about being patient, you know, and letting the game come to me and not rushing to try to do something and give this sage advice, you know. So that's what my approach is, and the best in the game that have done what I've done, that I respect the most. I did not make that up. I did it by talking to a lot of people who've been there and done that, and who know me and know what's needed. And that's, you know, I'm just really focusing on letting the game come to me, about being patient and just being a good dude and practicing good leadership, man. Because if you're a good dude,
That's so good.
then you know, if you practice good leadership, and the process of guiding them to find mental skills to get out of their own damn way is going to happen naturally, right?
Well, that's kind of what I want to. Yeah, you brought up getting out of your own way, and then you as an advisor, so to speak, coach, like, you know, it's always that first do no harm, right? Figure out what they're doing right, and then or what they're doing and what needs improvement and how. So I'm curious as to like
Yeah.
what do you typically see, or what is it that are common themes or threads? Like you said, you know, when you explain of these guys, like, you know, one, their whole life at this point has been trying to get into Major League Baseball. At that point, they've been playing since they were a little kid, maybe
Right.
not super competitively till a little bit older, but still as a kid.
Yeah.
And then now they're in this place. All right, I'm going to hit the minor leagues. I'm still going for this. This
Yeah.
is what I want to do. And
Yeah.
then they might get that, oh, hey, we get called up, and then kicked right back down, and they get called up. So geez, man, I mean, can't imagine, like, here I am on the stage and then now I'm back off here. Like at that point, I don't care, you know, how good or bad you are at the game in terms of relative to the other professional athletes and your skill level. That seems to me that's all mental game right there. I mean, how do you do that? Like, what do you see with that? How does that work? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the first thing is to kind of understand, you know, to kind of put it in perspective as far as like, hey, you know, what their relative experiences with mental skills. Are they a 4-year college guy, or the guy right out of high school, or the guy out of the Dominican Republic that's learning English? I mean, they're all over the place, you know. And so I think it's establishing a baseline, which you guys appreciation, as far as what they know, what they don't know, what are they using that's working, what's not working. And then a lot of times my job is to remove barriers, right? And I think the removing barriers is by like doing things as far as like this that are, they're really process oriented, right? Like a lot of guys don't have, you know, in baseball, we put a lot of value on superstition and rituals, but we don't
Mm-hmm.
put value on routines. And the difference is that, you know, superstitions, I mean, I was talking to a bunch of 14-year-olds, and one of the guys said that he knew he would play at his best if he held his piss the whole game.
Yep.
How the hell are you holding your piss the whole game, man? You know, it's like the fight, you know, the fight, flight, or freeze response. Usually, I'm like, I was a king of the pregame crap.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, like a horse race.
That's
you know?
right, man. So I'm like, how the hell are you holding? Do you have a Gatorade bottle at the end of the bench? And because we were talking about superstitions and rituals. Rituals are things you do, but routine is a set of, you know, how your attitudes and behaviors that funnel your attention just to one thing so you can let your skill out, right? And usually 3 to 5 steps, you know, and a lot of that's process oriented, and there's micro processes and macro processes from. So again, you know, baseball, we love routine, you know, and then, you know, and sometimes we disrupt the routine on purpose because we got to be adaptive, right? And so one of the things we're finding in the big leagues is that the players are like used to showing up at the ballpark a certain amount of time. Well, they can't, and then they go through their rituals, you know, and then, you know, and then, but then now that's been condensed, right? And so now it's completely disruptive as far as what they do to get ready for a ball game, right? And so the idea is, okay, from a macro level, from a day-to-day, you know, what does that look like? But then let's neck that down down to a pitch to pitch level, you know. So there's 30 seconds between pitches. Like, what are you doing? You know, what are the attitudes you're having? What are the behaviors, right? You know, so a lot of that has to do with, you know, things like OODA loop and stuff like that too. But ours is that, you know, okay, hey, so, you know, doing my physical, mental, tactical training, right? So I clear the mechanism. I load up, you know, in terms of what my cue is. You know, I have a physical cue, like taking my gloves. Evan Longoria used to do gloves. He does clear the mechanism. Take a big clearing breath, step out of the box, think about my cue, you know, and then step in, and then let's go, right? You know, and so what I'm doing is I'm trying to funnel my through my behaviors and my attitudes, I'm trying to not think more. I'm trying to funnel that down
It's the
into
Reds.
thinking less.
Yeah.
And so if I could do that from a pitch to pitch, from an inning to inning, from a game to game, and then I have routines that help funnel my attention and energy where it needs to be and when it needs to be there, that's what I'm investing in, and then that helps me, gives me something I can control versus something I can't control, which is like related to the outcomes, like whether we win or lose, or, whether, I went 3 for 4, I went 0 for 4. And for baseball players, it's the law of averages. Slumps are a really interesting thing as well, too.
Yeah.
Because it's an inevitable part of the game. And so what do you attribute that to? Is it just, is that a math problem? Is this, is this something to where then, when I'm in a slump and I just kind of give up? Or, is this an opportunity then I just double down on my process? I have something to go to when I need to be at my, whether it's things are going well or things are not going well.
Talk about epitomizing the yin and yang on your hat, Andy. So I'm all things disruptive, and I absolutely love that because, Brian and I have deep discussions about the box and thinking out of the box. And in this term, everything's happening inside of that box. And Brian does a great thing if you see him in person about, hey, listen, until we fully explored what's in the box, don't go venturing out. But when we talk about routines can be horribly psychologically disruptive. If you take a look early Iraq, the 626 days, if you know what I'm talking about, the op tempo and the way things were. Why did we operate that way? We operated that way was because that's what worked for us in the past. So we're just going to repeat those behaviors, even though they're not going to help us transfer the power to the locals who need it the most. I remember being in Alamogordo, and I was walking around, and I said, my God, it looks like we're back at Princeton, back in the East Coast. And they said, yeah, we imported all this brick and made these roads to make it look like it because most of our scientists came from the East Coast, and we wanted it to look familiar to them out in the middle of the desert. And then I was in Monrovia in Liberia, and Monrovia is the same way. The capital is set out just like some small city outside of DC. And what happens is, I'll agree that when you put all the kids in a karate gi or you put them in a baseball uniform, they'll play better. I get that part of psychology, but reliance on totems that are outside of the ken of your human performance, I'm completely against. So what I like in disruption is, listen, sometimes psychologically, sociologically, physiologically, you got to approach this a little bit different and do something outside of your comfort zone to find out just how much you can achieve when you're out there.
That's right. Yeah, that's spot on, Greg. And I think you made an important distinction too, is like the difference between closed loop tasks and open loop tasks. Right?
Absolutely.
When you're in combat, it's very open loops. Like sometimes by routinizing things, you're making yourself more vulnerable to the enemy. Like you guys have talked about and taught for years, like, okay, well, if I go on the patrol at the same time through the same route every single time, I'm basically just, I'm creating I'm very, vulnerable to an ambush, right? You're asking for it, right? But if it's like, it's it's a game of cat and mouse, and when I'm a hitter and a pitcher, right? Or what I think is really applicable to what you guys teach with HBPRA is like when I get on first base and I'm getting a lead off to go steal a pitch, right?
Stealing the base, immediately what I thought of, Andy. You spot on.
And that's something I really want to geek out with you guys in future separate calls, because I think that's a really, like, understanding the situation, understanding what the baseline of the pitcher is as far as like, hey, and really cueing to what is the anomaly, and then that leads to my decision about where I go or come back.
Yes.
And what is the acceptable risk I can take in terms of my lead off. Like, to me, I think that's a really applicable area, and so in this case, what is my process that I'm going through to then understand what the baseline is? What is he doing, and what does that tell me based on the situation? What is there an anomaly or not? And then what does that lead to a decision whether I can go? Or get another inch on my lead to give me a higher probability, that I'm going to be able to reach base, right? And that's those are little micro parts of the game we're investing in the Reds that has been lost because we're throwing big and we're hitting big, and everything's launch angles and everything's about velocity and so on and so forth too. But this small ball aspect of the game has been ignored a little bit too. And so how do you kind of take the cutting edge use technology? How do you use these processes that are cognitive and physical to then get back to this basic set of skills that have to do with stealing bases or running bases, right?
Listen, space-time would be your tactical level consideration. So your operational level would be your training to the point where the person can read the strategic level, which would be all of those things that are going on at the pitcher, at the catcher, at the batter. So you're talking about sizing up cognition. Do you get what I'm trying to say? And saying, okay, I am in the moment at this time. How does this affect longitudinally what I'm going to do next? This is Brian. This is our next show right there.
No, I completely agree with that, because there's so many routes we could take, especially with base stealing. And then what you're talking about is, you know, seizing some sort of initiative. How do I get the initiative and then capitalize? I mean, there's so many different ways we can go into that. And I agree. You keep bringing up these, like, you keep using the word micro, you know, for different terms that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Which is that what that means? I don't. But that, I think that's a good point.
Since high school, he's heard that. But go ahead, Brian. We'll pretend that the hair is
that's
more
for your listeners. That wasn't for you. That wasn't for you, Brian.
Oh my God.
Brian, beard big.
Yeah.
Macro.
So
small. Micro.
You keep using this term. I don't understand these words.
I'm just a simple caveman.
I'm caveman lawyer. I'm just a caveman, which I love that skit, because that's a lot like me, except I'm not a caveman or a lawyer, so I'm neither of those things. But no,
that's how I get treated by Mission 60.
You keep caveman
Why
lawyer.
won't they take my call?
Use that? I think that I can use that as my new LinkedIn title, right? Caveman lawyer. I don't know. So I see so many random things on people's LinkedIn, what they call themselves. I don't know. I see a lot of letters, numbers sometimes, and then now I think I'm going to use caveman lawyer. So, but anyway, no, you talk about, and it's important to understand, like, these are all micro things, because, you know, just same thing. I used to tell my wife different stuff. She's unhappy because this, well, I've been slacking behind here and this, and I haven't been eating well, and I haven't been working out like I used to, and I got to do this, and now I'm going to change this. Where I'm like, well, okay. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to change one thing, and you're going to do that every day until it's now part of your routine. Then you're going to change one more thing. I go one day at a time, 1%, whatever it is, just focus on one little thing. I go, then that becomes your routine. So now you get to focus on a new thing. Well, 3 months later, you've now done 17 different changes rather than trying to do it all at once, you know? So it's important, but I'm curious, because you brought up something that's huge, especially when it comes to mental skills and mental performance. And you talk about, you know, when hitters get into some sort of hitting slump, or I think something similar with pitchers, where all of a sudden, yeah, man, they're just not on their game. And I'm curious as to what's the research out there on that? What do people think? Is there a general consensus of how those things happen, or what needs to be done? And I know it can take a little bit of time for guys to get out of that. It can take a long time for guys to get out of it, but that slump can be used in a number of different areas, no matter what your job is or what your profession. Like, you get into slumps in life. You get in that where you're not hitting, you're not seeing the ball very well, or you're not pitching like you used to. So is there some sort of general consensus about the mental aspect of that?
Yeah, man, it's such a loaded question, and I think start off by saying, like, you know, I don't know completely, right? You know, and that's an area of exploration for me too. It's something to look at too. I think the conventional wisdom from my field was, you know, many years ago was like, hey, slumps don't exist. And actually, I kind of went back and forth with a guy in the UK who's a sports psychologist, you know, because he was using the word slump, and I'm like, slumps really aren't real. I mean, they just the law of averages, you know. I mean, it's over time. It doesn't exist really over time, right? And there's been some interesting research about this. I'll send it to you guys too, about the hot streak with basketball.
Yep.
And so, like, the idea about the hot streak is, you know, and the hot hand theory, you know, and it debunks this idea about the hot hand, right? You know, in terms of longitudinally, right? And so I think that's part of it. There's the science piece of it, that, hey, what is the probability that, you know, you're going to go through these valleys in terms of how well you're hitting, how well you're pitching, or whatever it is too. I mean, obviously the law of averages suggests that the likelihood is far higher that you're going to go through some sort of valley, you know. But from the psychological piece to that too is then how do you approach that versus when you're doing really, really well. And I think for me, what's interesting is that when guys get into trouble, that's when I tend to get the business is the highest.
Mm-hmm.
I know that. I know that's for sure. And I think, versus the opposite, which is when I'm really kicking ass, man, and I'm on a hot streak, you know, that's probably when I would really want to see you too, because
Yes.
you cycle up, and can you hit the accelerator on this thing, It's interesting, baseball culturally, it's almost like when a guy, the no hitter, he's doing really well. It's again, they disassociate. It's like, leave him alone, don't talk to him.
Yeah.
Whatever, like, leave him alone. He's got a no hitter going. Like, he's on the edge of the bench with his jacket on and nobody's talking to him. It's like, and so, why the hell is that? I don't know. And so, but to me, when I talk about the guys, I mean, if you're falling back on your process, you have something to go to get, your mind and your body where it needs to be when it needs to be there. And if you're really dogged about that process, you make refinements as you need it. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, whether you're doing well or whether you got a hot streak going or you got a slump. The process is still the freaking same. That's what I tell the guys, or I will when I do get the opportunity, and I have in the past. And I think that's what's super important at the end of the day. It's when guys make massive changes to not only technically or tactically,
Yeah.
to their process psychologically. That's when they get themselves into trouble. And then when the opportunity, the window happens for them to cycle out of that slump, the probability goes way down because they haven't, the process that's within their control has not been then leveraged.
Yep.
No, that's a good point. And then it kind of brings into what I loved about the movie Moneyball that they made about a whole story about Billy Beane, which again, like you said, baseball's always been a game of statistics. You literally, people sit there and go through the stats as the game goes along. I mean, it's always been about numbers, which is about math, but I think there is, because there's also, it's sports, man, and we've all played before, and people are naturally superstitious. Like, athletes are the most superstitious people I've ever met, right? And that's why yeah. And it's like, hey, oh my gosh, I threw the best game of my life, and you know what? I forgot to wash my underwear that day. Well, that's it. Now I'm never washing my underwear again. You're like, this is the most ridiculous thing. So to me, I take both sides of that argument where I go, okay, well, that has nothing to do with it whatsoever. But I also understand that if it does for you, then that can help. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's mathematically, scientifically impossible. That doesn't work. But that psychologically, if that works for you, it works for you. You know what I mean? Let's cultivate that. But don't rely on that as when it's going wrong. That's the problem, is like, you have to be able to let that go when it fails you, because you'll realize, oh, that failed me. And the reason why, again, I brought up the Moneyball movies, it shows, like you just said, a slump is like, a big hitter goes through a hitting slump. No, they didn't. Over the course of their career, guess what? Their batting average is still the same. So it's just the law of numbers here, and averages, and the law of large numbers and small numbers. Like, we play with that, and we take, because math is, I don't get it. I'm a Marine. I don't understand math at all. Right. So we can't see it. We only see what's in front of us. And that leads us down this psychological path of figuring out why it went wrong or why it went right, or how do I replicate that over and over and over again. And then if I come up with some ridiculous thing that it works, oh, that was the day I changed my coffee order in the morning. Holy shit, that's my new coffee. It's like, dude, come on. But what I'm saying, the reason why I bring it up is you're missing a chance to see was there a change in your process? And that change led to that, because maybe now that has to become the new thing. What was it that because what was the proximate cause? What were all of the contributing factors that led to this? And those are all in there. And so peeling those apart is still really difficult to do, because one, it can be subjective, and two, it's individualized. It's different from one person to the next. And I think that's why they hire people like you to come on and try and figure out exactly what it is.
That's right. It's exactly right. It's gonna, and again, I mean, the way to do that is to guide them. Baseball players are very secure in nature as well too, and I think that goes up exponentially the higher you go. And I felt like, and I've heard that, and I think it's because the expectations that are put on me too, which is interesting, because like the casual fan likes to like bag on these guys, like, oh, you're playing a kid's game, you're getting paid tens of millions of dollars on this stuff too, man. And then but the pressure these guys put on themselves, I would not ever want.
Yeah.
So I think that's another thing you have to deal with as well too, is understanding what expectations are, and again, it's one of those things where you got to break it down. Okay, well, what's an expectation? Expectation is a belief that something's going to happen based on two things: credible information or relative experience. So like if you don't have one of those things, then that's either an anticipation or that's an assumption, right?
Yep.
Sometimes we got to plan off of assumptions. We don't really want to, but like, hey, if I can move the needle from, an assumption to an anticipation, that's sometimes better than an expectation, right? So is the expectation of yourself, or is that what you perceive other people are expecting of you, right? And that's an interesting conversation in and of itself.
Well, I think what's interesting is that Brian and I would never ambush you with the question like this. But the reason why is the most important thing is, where do you see yourself in 2, 5, or 10 years? One, you're going to have a fascinating ride. And whether, that continues forever, with the Reds, or if your life takes on some sort of bifurcation where you're doing this and that and whatever, you're right. You've had a fascinating life to this point, which is amazing. And that's what makes you such a great role model to me, a great coach that I like listening to. But God only knows, Buddha, Vishnu, Allah, what's next for Andy Reese. And I think that's why we want to remain friends, because we're eating the popcorn, baby. We don't know what's happening next, and we want to look into that.
Me too, man. And just figuring it out one day at a time, man. But for right now, I mean, I really appreciate that, Greg, and I just respect you guys immensely. And I think for right now, it's I think what's cool about us is that our mission remains the same.
Yep.
Regardless, that's whether you're working with baseball or law enforcement or business or whatever the hell it is. It just, people are people, man, and we're trying to help people get better at what they do, period, man. And
exactly,
if we can do that, then that's a pretty damn good life mission, man. And so there you go.
Yeah, no, that kind of comes in with how the message is delivered sometimes. I mean, I that's something I constantly have to work on, even just personal relationships, like where people have been like, hey man, like you were a huge asshole right there. I was like, no, I wasn't. I was just very deliberate. Like my wife calls it, like that fucking Chicago comes out of you, and it comes just, yeah, it's very direct and focused, and I don't mean anything by it. It's just, I've come to, this is specifically what I want to say, and I want to get it to you in the most clear, concise manner. But sometimes it comes off as like, Jesus, man, what did I do wrong? And I'm like, oh no, I'm sorry, man. Like, let me figure this out here. Let me shake that off a little bit. Look, this is why I said that. And actually it leads into one thing I did want to ask you, just to explain. I thought it was a great post the other day you put on LinkedIn, and I was like, hey, this is freaking awesome. And then Greg commented, you commented along, and it's important of using terms correctly, understand what the meaning is and how to use them, because they have meaning to it, and this is what they mean. But you talked about affirmation and praise, and give our listeners, please, like kind of an explanation of that post that you did with those terms and how that comes across, because I loved it. I thought it was really great.
I almost like this shows we're on the same wavelength, because look at my book and look what I tabbed.
Ah, there you go. Praise and affirm. Yeah. Praise versus affirm, I should say. Yeah.
I mean, they're not bad or good, right? I mean, we tend to use, and this comes from motivational interviewing, which is a relatively new set of skills for me as a coach, where I can't say it enough. I mean, it's kind of changing my life as I'm in my coaching style, because I feel like in the military, like, we do a lot of time as leaders, we spend a lot of time training and educating, but we don't do a lot of time coaching, where we can we guide our subordinates or our peers, to where we plant seeds to where it becomes then their idea and where they own it. Like, so like it's we show, tell, and do, we don't guide very well.
Yep.
Or maybe we learn that through our experience later on, and so I'll just to answer your question though. And so this comes from motivational interviewing, is that affirmations help athletes encourage themselves. That's the biggest thing too, So praise is kind of surface. I think it's kind of surface level, and I think it has a purpose. And there's some research that talks about praise in terms of motivation, which you look at DC and Ryan about what is, we're all motivated intrinsically and extrinsically. You guys have talked about this show, and then we talk about, the CAR method. We got to have competence, autonomy, and relatedness. We know that those factors are important there too. But so it's almost kind of like how as a leader or as a coach can I influence others by using more affirmations versus praise. And the difference is, and I try to use this example that Greg so awesomely set me up for success to make this point in that post that nobody read except for Greg.
That's it.
Is that shout out to Moldova or whatever the hell as Greg says, is that the difference is that affirmations specifically touch into their belief system, right?
Absolutely.
Which is directly related to their confidence, right? And it's more specific, right? And so I think praise is very surface level. I think it has a place in terms of setting the tone and so on and so forth, in terms of positivity and effectiveness. But I think when you get the opportunity, you get the window and you pick your spot, whenever you can reinforce those affirmations, you really tap into the belief system, and the likelihood you're going to influence their motivation, whether it be extrinsic or intrinsic, is a lot higher. And so, and this book shows me how easy it is if you're just deliberate and intentional about it, right? And, because we throw praise out there all day long. I know I did, being the cheerleader guy, whatever, and I was like, man, everything I was saying might as well just been freaking white noise.
Yeah.
Tapping in that belief system.
Well,
go ahead, Greg. Yeah.
We like to street things up, and we always like to leave our regular listeners, both of them, with some motivational thing that they can do to change their life. And we were dealing with one group of folks, and Marion said, you want to change your life today? Take that phone, shut it off, and put it away. Do this for the next whatever, and those are easy skills that somebody can glam onto and go, wow, it did make a difference. So now I need me time. I need the no email afternoon. I need whatever else, right? So I would challenge our listeners, just for a day or for a couple of days, take the word but, B-U-T, comma, out, and change it for A-N-D. Because when you're talking to somebody, hey, Brian, that's a great idea. But the minute that you get to the but, that's a great idea. We erase all that shit. And here's my idea. Let's go forward. But if you say, well, that's a great idea, Brian, and I'd like you also to consider whatever. Now we're moving the ball. Now we're moving that ball forward. Now your leadoff run, you get what I'm trying to say, is on that base, ready to move. So just simple things. And Andy, you're a word guy, and you do a lot of reading and see what other people's acronyms are. I think sometimes we go crazy with all of those different ideas, and different people are saying the same vital central point. So if you want to administer change, one, start in your own life, and start small. Do something today, that might seem so small, micro, as you would say, or macro. Marion, you got me disbelieving both of those now. I don't know where, but start small, make an incremental change in your life, and watch how it changes everything around you for the better.
Well, no, you bring up actually a term, because I kind of wanted to bring this up to Andy, and then you kind of just, even with what you just said, Greg, with all that, we get so focused on these different terms sometimes that like we it's like you were kind of like doing too much work. And that was one, Andy, I kind of went with this with Greg with this kind of newer, not new, but it's a course we're developing and doing. We've changed a bunch of the format and different things, and how to make sure our training objectives are fit in with not just what we're doing each day, but how we're presenting the material and what that interaction is, because it's a lot in a short amount of time, but we have to get that immediate feedback, right? So how do we do that? How do we get that cognitive load, but still have it enough to be sticky? And I said, hey, let's look at it this way. And I was like, Greg, like day one, we'll tell them like, hey, we're your instructors, but day two, we're your coach. And by day three, we're your mentor. And he's like, yeah, hey, that's great, Brian. And I was like, okay, that was like, do we really need to go and do that? Or is that already,
because we've been doing that.
We don't need to say that. That's already
we had to name it. We had to put a name on it.
But I was like,
it's
okay,
so funny.
I was like, I should have just said that to the mirror. Like maybe
it'd be an interesting experiment to say, like, are you really priming them by saying that, or is it just, do you really need to say that or not? Like, have you guys done one with and one without?
No, because it doesn't, because that's how we do it anyway.
Exactly.
Like that first, when you first come into our course, it's us overwhelming you with stuff so that we can mold you. And so you're just going, whoa, I'm trying to catch this. Right. And then the day one or day two then is that like, all right, man, here's what I need you to do. Right. And by day three, it's, Andy, what'd you think of that? Well, that's a great point. But so we're already doing those roles without explicitly ever saying it, right?
So let me throw this at you. So Shelly's the smartest human I've ever met, and she's my grounding. You got to put grounding pole next to your house so it doesn't blow out your electricity. So she's the one that comes in and goes, you know, you got to step back. Like I try to think that I have a following and people that listen to me and take notes. Not at home. You get what I'm saying? So you're a little full of yourself today. So I'm doing my adjunct professorship at the local university, and we're going over sociological principles. And so after the semester, Shelley comes up and says, and Will Atkinson, Brian, you remember Will, teacher Atkinson, they come up and they said, that was great. I made all the students that were attending the course take whatever they wanted because I wanted them to be transparent and fun and happy. But they took a crafternoon and created a moral outrage meter. And what they would do is they would hold it up in class and move the arrow like red, yellow, green, or they would hold it up with a frowny face, however they wanted to do it when I was doing the lecture portion. And Shelley and Will said, okay, that was wonderful. You got a lot of feedback. What prompted you to do that? And I said, kids were falling asleep in my lecture. So what I wanted to do is I wanted them to have something in their hand that kept them focused on the words, thinking that I was going to hide some dialogue in there. So what I did is I used Andy Reese's method, stick. There was no carrot. There was no string. You know what I'm saying? But the idea is just what Brian said. Sometimes deliberate means you got to shut up and listen. I read a quote from, I'm not going to tell you who, but they said the days of the, directorial leadership are gone. And now it's everybody just sit around and say what your opinion is. And somewhere in there is the answer. Kiss my ass. Okay. How did Socrates die? I mean, do we want a historical perspective? You got to have a thought leader. And Andy, you are that. Okay. And then that thought leader has to be surrounded by people that are constantly moving that ball forward. You got to bat it around. You got to bat it around by a bunch of Coke-fueled dolphins. You got to be hitting that thing all the time, because if you don't, then neutral gets you nowhere. You're not going to get where you need to be.
Yeah, you're spot on, Greg, because I think like the approach that you have has to be based on who the audience is and who you're working with within, you know. So like you said, I mean, it's what method of content delivery what works for one audience and one environment, which may not work for every. So that's the art. That's the art to this, right? You know, and so
that kid from the Dominican Republic, Andy, he might not follow that lead. So you're going to have a whole new intro. You're going to have to change the delivery. You're going to have to be willing to step out and say, Brian, you take this slide because I'm not, I'm not there. I'm not feeling it. That the instructor many times is much more important than the material, and you understand that. And that's about being a human. You got to be a human to read another human.
You do, yeah. And it's interesting too, because I'm kind of curious to talk to you guys about like the cultural differences, like because you guys talk about what's the cultural nuances, but what's fundamentally the same between all humans. And like someone brought up the other day, like like kids from Latin countries, like they don't make eye contact because it's kind of something
that's it.
They don't do it. But like for us, North American countries, Western societies, like if you're really locked in, you make eye contact. But like if that may not be the case with a Latin player, and so if I had that visual, about that cue, what's going on, and I'm talking through a translator, there's a lot that's lost in translation, right? So do I make the choice, is he completely disrespecting me, or do I need to understand about what is he telling me by through this behavior, and then man, that's just going to be a whole nother episode too, man.
Another great episode, because culture is merely context. And once you understand that interpersonal communication, listen, I don't have to speak your language to speak to you. I don't have to know the principles of language to communicate. You don't have to speak
the language to read the writing on the wall.
No,
I mean, that's
exactly.
And that was a huge, like, that's a great one. I always use the George W. Bush example when he went to Iraq and that guy, threw the shoe at him. And then, and he ducked out, and then he threw the other one, and but they, every news channel, every cable news channel had their Middle East experts on there to go, hey, in this part of the world, that's a really big insult. It's like, dude, I don't care where you are in the world. If you're
Dr. Scholes, that's an insult. It doesn't matter.
It's like you don't need you don't need a PhD in anything to know, like, hey, that was an insult. Like you're that's when you're getting way too into this, going like, look, man, yes. I mean, like little stuff like that is just it's common sense, but because oh man, we always see that. Well, humans are primed to see the differences in others, right? We see that automatically because hey man, that person doesn't look like they're part of my tribe. Are they going to try and kill me? That's in our DNA. Okay, so I have to understand that. I'm not going to get around that. So I just look for those similarities. How is this similar to some other experience that I've had? And go that I just compare that. And that's when the culture gets in, I mean, it's like in Japan, they pack people into the trains and the subways and stuff like that. People work on the platforms, the white gloves, and they push people in because it's so packed in there. And it's like that would never work in Chicago or New York City. Like we're not going to do that as Americans, you know what I'm saying? But you would see that right away. And obviously, like if you can't figure that out within 5 seconds of being dropped into there, you probably shouldn't be traveling the world. You know what I'm saying?
Passport.
Yep. So
surrender your passport.
Well, I'll have to circle back around with you when I'm hoping that right now, I mean, we got the major season's on, the minor league season's on, but like the Dominican Republic is still a lot of COVID going on down there too. So I'm really excited about getting down there to kind of just to really do a good assessment, and so I'll have to circle back around with you guys. I'll shoot you a text and be
like, for sure.
It's like, and we travel, for the love of God, man. We're still doing in-person training. It hasn't slowed us down a bit. So bring us down. We'd love to do that. Marin can pitch like you've never seen before. He could be your pitching coach for a day.
Greg, can you hit a fungo? Can he,
I would have to sit behind the batter. You'd have to have a cooler. And I would kind of sit, frumpy kind of thing. And when the people came up, I would psychologically assess them for you. You know what I'm saying? The umpire could look over my shoulder. Do you get what I'm trying to say? And when and they'd go, "What's the matter?" And I go, "Well, I noticed that your right foot is a little far." I think we'd have a ball. Let's do it for a weekend. They don't even have to pay us.
We've been talking about this whole idea, about how the stress shoot of like stress hitting or stress pitching, I need to practice harder, and I was talking about that we need a designated insult guy. So like, would you be our designated personal insult guy?
That's Brian.
That would be so much fun.
Brian,
that would be so much fun.
Poor Brian is like a battered spouse in a relationship. Every day he walks out black and blue. Hey, I'll tell you, you want to do one? I'll give you $1 million.
Who's got this Magnum PI mustache back here? Is insulting my mother? What the
hell? Yeah, exactly.
I'll give you $1 million idea, Andy, and it came from Greg. Just quote me somewhere later down on the thing. Take your guys. There's so many malls now that are out of business, so you can rent one for your movies and everything else. Rent a mall and have your pitcher and your batters go in the mall, in the center of the mall, and have them pitch from pitcher's mound there. Measure it out. Do it. Change the environment. Then the next day, go into one of these theaters. They're not using theaters anymore. Aurora, 1, 2, 3. Rent that son of a bitch and take them down there and do it with low or no lighting. The idea is confidence and competence. If you can get those two, then you can ratchet them with their human behavior to any level you want. Because human behavior and human performance are the same thing. The only people that make a distinction between them are the people that are trying to sell a book. You get what I'm trying to say? Or sell some training. When it comes right down to it, humans are humans. You take them out of their uniform, you take them out of their comfort zone, and you put the same rules that apply in there. Once their brain figures out where's Waldo, they've got it. They've got that skill, and they'll be able to do it anywhere. Try that and tell me how that comes out.
Oh man, I will. You got my 2 brain cells firing.
Tell me that's
both
not
of
going
them?
though.
Both of them are going now.
It reminds me of smoking the glass dick in a motel room along 696. So hey, we've all had that history we're not too proud of. You get what I'm saying?
That's a different episode, and one that probably
it's an all new episode.
It's a whole new one. We don't want to get into that.
Yeah.
Well, man, I don't want to take too much more of your time, and I appreciate you coming on. I think we actually came up with some good ideas here that I'd love to come back on, do something specifically very, very clear, just what we started talking about with base running and some of the decisions making process, because it's all the same psychological, physiological, sociological principles, man. Small unit decision making, right? Communication skills, it's all the same stuff. So I would love to dig into an idea like that where we can kind of pick it apart. I think that would be really fun. So let's definitely get you back on here. We really appreciate you coming on, man.
Shout out to Steve Drum, was along with us watching today. Steve's a good friend of us and you, Andy. And shout out to all those vets that are out there. If you think you need help, make sure you do something about it.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you.
Yeah, hey, lots of love for you guys. Really appreciate you. Like, I can't wait for the next time. This is fun. Highlight of my day for sure. And then be sure to check these guys out if you already haven't. And I'm gonna be pushing this out on my channels with all 2 followers that include you 2 guys. And Arcadia Cognerati, man, you guys are doing it right. And I'm a huge fan, and I'm just trying to figure out more ways that we can do some work together. And I know we got the same purpose. And go Reds, and see you in the arena.
All right, man. Thanks a lot. Everyone listening, don't forget to follow us on social media, share it with your friends if you enjoyed it. And don't forget that training changes behavior. Actually, wait, since Andy Reese is on, I have to clarify that statement for him. Training can change behavior. So
yes.
So that's his comment that I liked it. So we'll in honor of you today, Andy, we'll end it on that. Today only. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in.
Thanks, guys.